are watching QTV and thank you so much for joining us on our news desk. The headlines. The Zambia Revenue Authority ZRA collected a total of 27.7 billion kwacha in gross taxes from January to June 2018. A team from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) is expected in the country next week for continued consultations for a possible financial bailout. The Zambia Compulsory Agency has instituted investigations into allegations of counterfeit blue band butter being sold on the market. Here now is the news in detail. The Zambia Revenue Authority ZRA says it has collected a total of 27.7 billion kwacha in gross taxes from 1st January to 30th June 2018. Addressing a media briefing in Lusaka, ZRA Commissioner General Kingsley Chanda has said the authority made tax refunds amounting to 4.5 billion kwacha during the same period. Mr. Chanda says this resulted in a net collection of 23.2 billion kwacha, which was 1.4 billion kwacha or 6.4% above target of 21.8 billion kwacha. He says this performance was largely attributed to the strong outturn of domestic and import VAT during the period under review, owing to the successful implementation of key administrative and policy measures. And Mr. Chanda says ZRA in the first half of 2018 paid out 4.2 billion kwacha in VAT refunds. He says of this amount, 20.50 billion kwacha or 60% was paid to the mining sector, while 1.7 billion kwacha or 40% was paid to other sectors in the economy. The ZRA Commissioner General adds that 2.4 billion kwacha of revenue was foregone in various customs duty exemptions during the period under review on account of various trade concessions, of which 1.2 billion kwacha relates to trade protocols under SADC and COMESA. Mr. Chanda has since expressed confidence in achieving the targeted revenue collection for the year 2018.
June 2018, the authority collected 27.7 billion in gross tax collections, with refunds amounting to 4.5 billion. This resulted in a net collection of 23.2 billion, which was 1.4 billion or 6.4% above target. Our target was 21.8 billion. This performance was likely attributed to the strong outturn of domestic and import VAT during the period, and also, more importantly, the successful implementation of our key administrative and policy measures. Colleagues, you may recall that in the entire year 2017, we were 1.5 billion above target. In 2018, within 6 months, we are already at 1.4 billion above target. With this performance, I'm very optimistic that we will meet our annual targets. Let me briefly discuss the issue of tipping. I know.
Meanwhile, Mr. Chanda says the authority recorded a total of 2,912 interceptions during the period under review with a value of over 845 million kwacha.
We will continue with these operations. We will not stop on smuggling operations, because we do not just enhance revenues through these operations, but we also ensure that there is security, because customs operations are not just about revenue, they are also about national security. Imagine if you allowed illicit importations or even dangerous importations like guns and so on. No one would be spared. So those operations, including the operations at Kapirimposhi that some people have been speaking against, will continue and will not be intimidated. Since the adoption of our new approach to dealing with smugglers, the number of interceptions has continued to increase. During the period under review, the authority recorded a total of 2,912 interceptions with a value of 845 million kwacha. Now you can imagine, this is the money that we could have lost through smuggling activities if we are not doing these operations. This figure is up from the 2017 figure, where a value of 349 million worth of goods were intercepted. This jump shows an increase of about 69% in the number of interceptions and 142% in the value terms. Our anti-smuggling operations will continue and are now more focused and risk-based.
Secretary to the Treasury, Fredson Yamba, has disclosed that a team from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is expected in the country next week on the continuation of the consultative process. Mr. Yamba says the IMF's mission to visit to Zambia follows the successful submission of data that the fund had requested for. He says the meeting is expected to reconcile figures between the two parties and find the best way forward. Meanwhile, Mr. Yamba says the economic growth the country has continued to record since 2016 is as a result of increased investor confidence and recovery of global commodity prices. Speaking during the Southern African Development Community SADC Macroeconomic Peer Review Mechanism panel meeting in Johannesburg, South Africa, Mr. Yamba said other factors that have contributed to Zambia's improved economic growth were the improved performance of the agricultural sector and hydropower generation, which had previously been hampered by adverse weather conditions. Mr. Yamba noted that the stringent monetary policy pursued by government through the Bank of Zambia has resulted in the appreciation of the kwacha against major convertible currencies as well as deceleration in the inflation rate. He adds that Zambia has continued to improve its fiscal deficit, which stood at 7.6% of gross domestic product (GDP) in 2017 from 9.4% of GDP in 2015, and that government would endeavor to limit the growth of public debt by improving debt management. Mr. Yamba says this would be achieved by altering the debt structure to achieve 60% domestic and 40% external debt. This is contained in a statement issued by First Secretary of Press and Public Relations at Zambia High Commission in South Africa, Naomi Nyawadi. Government's activities in the monetary market have been cited as the main reason why interest rates are high in Zambia, despite the downwards movement in the lending benchmark. Economist Oliver Sasa says by offering attractive treasury bills, government has made itself main player in the market and thereby overcrowding the private sector. He says this is why commercial banks would rather lend to the central bank than to private sector whose risk of paying back the loan is high. Professor Sasa has told a QTV News by telephone that the implication of the overcrowding of private sector is that the average private sector player cannot service their loan. He notes that this is in turn leading to non-performing loans becoming too high, as is the case currently in the country. He states that this explains why commercial banks have also become reluctant to lend to the private sector operators on the market other than government. Professor Sasa says commercial banks need to upscale the interest rates to make sure that in an event of defaulting, they do not make losses when they lend to an average private sector operator. He says it is therefore not an excuse for commercial banks to refuse to reduce interest rates, as they have edged themselves against macroeconomic fundamentals.
It's not an excuse for the banks to continue refusing to move with the market. But these are factors that one has to understand, that is much, much more than mere reduction in statutory reserve ratios, mere reduction in reference rates by the central bank. One has to look at it in a more wholesome manner, that the factors at play are much more complicated than a mere movement. And the government has done, the central bank has done fairly well at that level. But we need to start addressing these other factors, including the behavior of the government itself, to the extent that they are still very much overcrowding private operators on the market by the yield that actually extends the market in terms of treasury bills.
Police in Mpulungu are looking for a suspect identified as Chuma Simfukwe of Chitongo village in Mpulungu district in connection with the murder of his daughter, a female juvenile aged 1 month. Police spokesperson Esther Katongo says the murder occurred on 8th July 2018 at around 20 hours at Chitongo village. She says the report was received from the mother of the victim, identified as Catherine Nawakwi, aged 19, who stated that as she was preparing dinner at about 1945 hours, her husband went home drunk and demanded that he eats the relish kapenta, which he had prepared alone, and it was at that point that a fight ensued, and in the process he punched the baby, who was on her mother's back, on the ribs, leading to the death of the baby. Ms. Katongo says the suspect is on the run while the body of the deceased baby is in Mpulungu Central Hospital mortuary awaiting post-mortem. And in a related development, police in Mukushi have arrested a male adult identified as Lakson Ngosa Mukonka Oliver, aged 23, of Kamwendo village, Chief Chitina, in connection with murder of his wife Memory Chituka, aged 25. Ms. Katongo says the incident is reported to have happened on 2nd July 2018 around 05 hours at Kamwendo village and was only reported to the police yesterday, the 11th of July 2018, by the sister of the victim.
Police officers in Mpulungu are looking for a suspect identified as Chuma Simfukwe of Chitongo village in Mpulungu district. This is in connection with the murder of his daughter, a baby, a female juvenile aged 1 month. The murder occurred on 8th July 2018 at about 20 hours at Chitongo village. The report was received from the mother of the victim, identified as Catherine Nawakwi, aged 19, who stated that as she was preparing dinner at about 19:45 hours, her husband went home drunk and demanded that he eat the relish which she had prepared alone. It was at that point when the fight ensued, and in the process he punched the baby on the ribs. The baby was at that particular point on her mother's back, and this led to the death of the same victim. The suspect is on the run. We are calling upon members of the public who could have information on the whereabouts of this person to report to any nearest police station. Then in Mukushi, we have arrested a male adult identified as Lexon Ngosa Makonka Oliver, age 23, of Kamwendo village, Chief Chitina of Mukushi district, in connection with the murder of his wife, Memory Chituka, aged 25. The incident is reported to have happened on 2nd July 2018 at about 05 hours at the same village, and was only reported to police yesterday by the sister of the victim. Sticks are alleged to have been used in the act, and the victim, who had sustained painful ribs and a swollen head, later died at Mukushi General Hospital. The suspect is currently detained in police custody, facing a charge of murder, while the body of the deceased is in the same hospital.
Zambia is officially the second largest market for Chinese investment in Africa. Chinese ambassador to Zambia, Li Ji, says the rule of law has made it possible for Chinese people to have confidence to invest in Zambia. Mr. Li says the social stability that has been sustained in Zambia is an important aspect of their cooperation with China. Mr. Li was speaking in Lusaka when he paid a courtesy call on Minister of Justice, Given Lubinda, at his office. Details are in the following report.
Zambia is the official second largest market for Chinese investments in Africa. Chinese ambassador to Zambia, Lin Jing-a, has confirmed. Mr. Li, who has been recently deployed to Zambia as the new Chinese envoy, attributes Zambia's rating to the rule of law that has made it possible for Chinese people to have confidence to invest in Zambia. Here, at his first official meeting with Minister of Justice, Given Lubinda, Mr. Li has expressed hope the good working relations that China and Zambia have had can be further enhanced.
As you mentioned, Honourable Minister, when a road is constructed, when heavy equipment is coming, the local employees are trained. But after one specific project, their skill should remain so that they can pick up jobs later on with other programs and projects. And we hope to see that this could be a very positive circle going around. Projects are going, the skills of the locals are improving, and the job opportunities will become more.
This assurance should surely please Mr. Lubinda and the Zambian government.
Our greatest concern at the moment is employment creation. We're happy to see heavy equipment on our roads, but for every heavy piece of equipment that comes on our roads, we have to ask ourselves, how many jobs does it create? If it is only destroying jobs, then maybe that is not the best approach. Because as you are aware, we're a very youthful population, but a lot of our youths are key to get employment. And we can only create employment if the partners that come to engage with us are also conscious of the fact that their investment and their approaches to development create space for employment creation.
Mr. Luvinda is however with some concerns.
There are quite a number of Chinese companies that are operating in Zambia, and they're bringing quite a lot of Chinese personnel to come and work on this project. And the immigration department is guided by laws that are passed by Parliament with regard to the skills that can be imported. And we're very conscious not to import any skills that will come and replace Zambian skilled people, because we also have quite a lot of Zambians who are skilled in many areas.
For Mr. Lee, these are issues that can be addressed.
And this year, our plan is to expand the training scale to about 900 trainees. So more people will get the opportunity to attend this training session in China. And Zambia ranks also number 2 in Africa to send professionals to have this training opportunity in China. We're very proud of that.
With this status quo that has ended with happy faces, it is hoped that a good working relationship will be sustained between the Chinese Embassy and the Ministry of Justice. Lazarus Sichula, QTV News, Lusaka.
The Zambia Compulsory Standards Agency, ZCSA, has instituted investigations into allegations claim that there is counterfeit blue band butter on the market to ascertain the objectiveness of the matter. This follows the video circulating on social media on the blue band fat spread, which could not melt in boiling water. Agency Public Relations Officer Lee Hamunji says as at 11th July 2018, ZCSA inspectors visited the Pick and Pay woodlands in Lusaka, where the product is purported to have been bought, and collected samples from different batches which have since been submitted for laboratory analysis. Mr. Hamunji states that the impending results will direct ZCSA follow-up action, which will be made public as soon as possible. He has also appealed to the claimant in the video to come forth and lodge a formal complaint to the regulator. Meanwhile, the National Biosafety Authority, NBA, has granted chain store Choppies superstores a permit to import products that may contain genetically modified organisms, GMOs. And the authority, in the presence of Choppies officials and law enforcement agencies, have destroyed products worth 21,000 kwacha, which were confiscated from Choppies stores as they were not subjected to risk assessment prior to their importation in order to ascertain their safety as food for feed. Choppies superstores made an application for the importation of products that are made from GMOs or may contain GMOs in this year. In a statement released to Q News, NBA Communications Manager Sandra Lombe says among the products the chain store will import and place on the market include instant Choppies porridge, chili beef flavored soup, oxtail flavored soup, shakalaka flavored soup, brown onion, and Choppies cornflakes. Ms. Lombe states that NBA board, during its last meeting held on Vice President Inongawina says the media is an important stakeholder in helping government achieve the full implementation of the 7th National Development Plan. Speaking when she officiated at the Policy Monitoring and Research Center PMRC Media Workshop on the role of the media in the implementation of the 7th National Development Plan in Lusaka, Ms. Wina says the role that the media plays in increasing public understanding on various socio-economic and policy issues in the 7th National Development Plan cannot be overemphasized. She has, however, urged journalists to continue seeking avenues of capacity development and empowerment in order to enhance the quality of reporting on development trajectories of the country. Ms. Wina says it is important that the media endeavors to empower citizens with constructive economic information, as well as information that highlights innovation and helps the public to monitor and evaluate government policies and programs. Speaking on a speech read on her behalf by Minister of Office of the Vice President, Sylvia Chalikosa, Ms. Winner says the media should also help a government in informing and educating the public on a number of developmental projects that government is implementing.
And several other developments taking place. The media should also endeavor to empower citizens with constructive information, economic information, as well as information that highlights innovation and helps the public to monitor and evaluate government policies and programs. This should also be information that enables us to determine whether public pronouncements are translated into public actions, among others.
Speaking earlier, PMRC Executive Director Bernadette Decker says the organization will continue to strive to contribute to the development of the country. Ms. Decker has encouraged the media to take advantage of various outstanding research works produced by PMRC, which provide excerpt analysis that should be fed into the news stories.
I would like to appeal to you also that beyond reporting on maybe eye-catching stories to do with individuals, may we take part, may we own this National Development Plan by taking part in disseminating pertaining to the aspirations that are in the 7th National Development Plan. So we are all stakeholders of Zambia, and we owe it to our country, to our children, to our mothers, and to ourselves that this country moves forward by 2021. Because I'm saying 2021 as a benchmark because of the National Development Plan, which has been designed to, has been planned to go until 2021. So as 2021 is coming, you and I should be able to point out at what we have done as an individual.
United States Ambassador to Zambia, Daniel Foote, has challenged parliamentarians to advocate for increased funding and public-private partnerships that will increase and promote national parks and wildlife preservation in the country. Speaking when he officiated at an International Conservation Caucus Foundation ICCF workshop for the Zambia Parliamentary Conservation Caucus, Mr. Foote said conserving and preserving national parks and wildlife requires huge funds and concerted efforts. He says government alone cannot manage to fund and preserve wildlife and national parks as the process is expensive and complicated, hence the need for PPP engagements. Mr. Foote says PPPs will provide the time and space to enable habitats of national parks and animal populations to recover, which will exponentially grow the tourism sector and related revenues. He has noted with concern how some of the biggest national parks in the country, such as the Kafue National Parks, are slowly depleting. Mr. Foote has also urged the ZPC caucus to look at ways to create opportunities for sustainable game farmers and ranchers so that bushmeat can not only be legally enjoyed in Zambia, but the international demand for the meat can also be looked at as a way of boosting the economy through exports.
I have already spent many evenings, several weeks, in tents in many of your parks. My candid opinion, and again, I told you I'm going to be blunt and honest, Kafue National Park is dying. I've been all around the park. It's hard to find animals. It's been poached terribly, and I'm really worried about it. It is your biggest park. I applaud the ZPCC for your efforts to evaluate the benefits of private institutions managing Kafue National Park and others for the benefit of all Zambians. Number two, private-public partnerships will provide the time and space to enable habitats and animal populations to recover, which I believe will exponentially grow the tourism sector and related revenues and enable you in Parliament in the long term to enable appropriate adequate resources and give your Department of National Parks and Wildlife the capacity to better oversee your national trade.
The Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTPD, has called for domestication of the Africa Mining Vision Action Plan, which calls for the harnessing of the potential of artisanal and small-scale mining. The center believes that this will improve women's livelihoods, stimulate entrepreneurship, as well as promote local and integrated national development. CTPD policy lead on extractives and development, Natalie Kunda, says the center also recognizes the key gender-related challenge that women face in the sector, which include limited access to capital and financing for the mining operations from mainstream financial institutions, the lack of appropriate machinery and technology, limited access to information on licensing, geological survey data mapping, as well as market access. Ms. Kunda says there is need to come up with initiatives targeted at addressing these gaps. Mrs. Kaunda has further called for support towards women involved in mining, saying this is critical if the country is to attain targets set out in the 7th National Development Plan that seeks to leave no one behind. She adds that there is also need to look at the health and safety aspect for women involved in mining.
A case in point is that of women that engage in silica mining in Mufulira. So what is noted here is that because of a limitation in terms of negotiation skills, these women are constantly duped by middlemen who buy their commodity prices at a cheaper price but sell them at a higher price to the end users. The Center for Trade Policy and Development then would like to recommend that the artisanal and small-scale sector with a specific focus on women is critically looked at as a way of promoting economic development opportunities in the country. If the sector is properly harnessed, it has the potential of increasing the country's GDP, but also strengthening efforts towards domestic resource mobilization. Therefore, as the Ministry of Mines is planning to host a conference on artisanal and small-scale mining, the Center for Trade Policy and Development would like to recommend that the artisanal and small-scale sector, but with a specific focus on women, is critically looked at so that their needs and priorities are adhered to. A recommendation would also be the formation of a specific task force that looks at this sector critically, as it is a sector that is largely increasing day by day.
Government has reaffirmed its commitment to improving attendance and performance of vulnerable children in community and government schools. In a speech read on his behalf by Siwuyunji District Commissioner Jairus Simukoko during the launch of the World Bicycle Relief's Bicycle for Education Empowerment Program, BEEP, a partnership between WBR and the Ministry of General Education at Shamilimo Primary School in Siwuyunji District, Minister of General Education David Mavumba appreciated contributions cooperating partners such as WBR have been making to improve the quality for rural school-going children. He says government is committed to improving the retention of the girl child back to school. The launch marked the beginning of the distribution of 2,400 bicycles to learners, selected teachers, and community supporters in Chongwe, Kafue, Namwala, and Siwuyunji districts. More in this report.
They say education is the key to success, but for some children in rural areas, the key to success appears to be far-fetched due to long distances they ought to travel to their respective schools. This discourages many, especially the girl child, from completing their education. This, however, is about to be a thing of the past for the people of Siwuyunji district and many other parts of the country, as government, with support from its cooperating partners, has reaffirmed its commitment to improving attendance and performance of vulnerable children in community and government schools. The Ministry of General Education, in close collaboration with the World Bicycle Relief, have launched a Bicycle for Education Empowerment Program, BEEP, at Shamilimo Primary School in Siwuyunji District, which will cushion some of the challenges school-going children in rural areas face. In a speech read on his behalf by Siwuyunji District Commissioner Jairus Simukoko at the launch, Minister of General Education David Mavumba appreciated contributions its cooperating partners such as WBR have been making to improve the quality of education for school-going children in rural areas. The launch marked the beginning of the distribution of 2,400 bicycles to learners, selected teachers, and community supporters in Chongwe, Kafue, Namwala, and Siwuyunji districts.
For children living in rural areas. Muzenzi wamene ngwambati tupashirije vana vesu kwambati vachikwaje kumitinga mbaga ni yaluyo, especially in rural areas who are often faced with the challenge of walking long distance to school. The program empowers school-going children and also households by giving them bicycles.
Its inception, BIP has distributed 56,400 Buffalo bicycles to selected teachers, pupils, and community supporters. Meanwhile, WBR Programs Manager Frank Kanyambi explained that the bicycles will ease mobility of pupils living far from various schools in the districts, thereby improving school attendance.
And for them to implement this program, they will be working with the community supporters, whom we call volunteers, and these are BSC, Bicycle Supervisory Committee. They are the ones together with the teachers who are going to implement this program. And also to sustain the operation of this program, we also train field mechanics. Those are the ones who service the bicycles. They will be providing monthly servicing, which we are calling preventative maintenance. At the same time, they will be servicing the bicycles.
On the other hand, the school headmaster Graham Kwakwa and the District Education Board Secretary Sylvester Mkanda thanked government and its cooperating partners for this gesture.
The World Bicycle Relief is going to distribute 135 bicycles to our children here, of which, sir, our parents are very happy that you have assisted children who usually walk long distances coming to school. The guest of honor, sir, we definitely believe that the bicycles are going to improve on punctuality.
We have paid, but because of the coming of these organizations, we have seen massive development. The expansion and improvement of our schools is as a result of such measures.
For QTV News, I'm Alfred Mwansa in Shawuyunji District.
Zambia Association of Manufacturers ZAM Chief Executive Officer Chipeko Zulu has noted the need for small-scale manufacturers to be provided with capital to enable them access affordable or zero-rated machinery from abroad. Speaking to Q News in an interview, Ms. Zulu says lack of machinery still remains a challenge for small-scale manufacturers, especially those in agro-processing. She said ZAM is engaging with the National Technology Business Center to see if they can come up with innovations that would see the manufacturing of equipment that can be accessed and used by small-scale manufacturers. Mrs. Zulu has since urged government through the Ministry of Finance to consider zero-rating imported manufacturing machinery in the national budget.
Especially when we're looking at the cost of importing machinery, for focusing on the agro-processing sector, for example, there is still need for us to ensure that we have capital allowances to enable our small-scale players to access machinery from abroad. But aside from that, I think we do have to start looking at this a bit differently to say, is there opportunity for us to develop local solutions for our small-scale manufacturers? I think we have been engaging with the National Technology Business Center, and we've seen some innovations actually coming out of the Zambian market that are looking at processing various types of agricultural produce. And this tells us that there is an opportunity. We do have the skill set, and we do have the engineers that are able to manufacture equipment for the purpose of processing, especially in the small-scale subsector. So that's an area that we could actually look to encourage as a country. And when we're talking about local sourcing, it can actually be looked at from the perspective of machinery as a way of reducing the cost for small-scale manufacturers. But if we're looking at accessing much more sophisticated equipment, then it does call for various measures to be put in the national budget that allow us to access capital equipment at a very low cost, whether zero-rated or with a certain amount being allocated in terms of the capital allowance to support.
That item concludes our news, but before I take a run, here's a relook of stories and headlines. The Zambia Revenue Authority ZRA collected a total of 27.7 billion kwacha in the gross taxes from January to June 2018. A team from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) is expected in the country next week for continued consultations for a possible financial bailout. The Zambia Compulsory Agency has instituted investigations into allegations of counterfeit Blue Band butter being sold in the market. And that's all for the news. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye. God bless.